Inheritance refers to the process by which individuals receive genetic traits, characteristics, or assets from their parents or ancestors. In genetics, inheritance determines the transmission of genes from one generation to another, leading to the resemblance between family members. It plays a crucial role in understanding genetic disorders and hereditary diseases. In a broader context, inheritance also encompasses the passing down of non-genetic assets such as wealth, property, knowledge, and traditions. It can have significant implications on social structures, economic disparities, and cultural heritage. Overall, inheritance shapes our identities, influences our opportunities, and carries the legacy of those who came before us. Tim is overjoyed when he inherits his late father's secret wooden chest, but the key to his father's inheritance is with his estranged sister. Tim must brace himself for another nightmare when he receives the keys from her and opens the box. Tim's pulse began to race as he tried to understand what the lawyer had just said on the phone. "Are you there, Mr. Parker? Hello. Could you kindly come to my office today and pick up the chest your father left you?" The attorney's voice snapped the 35-year-old businessman out of his reverie. That and nothing else? Tim was perplexed. He never let anyone get near the box. Why would he give it to me when he wasn't even willing to show me what was inside? Tim's thoughts returned to the lawyer's statements as he fought to make sense of it all. The afternoon, he drove to the lawyer's office, his mind racing with questions and conjectures about what might be in the box. What lies within that chest? What was my father keeping from my sister and me? Tim's gaze was drawn to the old wooden trunk sitting on the table in the corner as he entered the lawyer's office that afternoon. He couldn't take his gaze away from it, and for a brief minute it appeared as if some magnetic energy was bringing him closer to it. Only if Tim had known what he was bringing home that afternoon. "Mr. Parker, please sign these papers," the lawyer said, cutting Tim off in his train of thinking. Tim signed the documents, summoned his driver to the second-floor office to transfer the heavy chest to his car, and as he turned to leave, he remembered the key. "Mr. Hugh, almost forgot. Can I have the key to the chest?" He inquired with the lawyer and was astounded to hear that he had only received the chest, but not the key. "How will I open this darn thing without the key?" he exclaimed. "Memories are the immeasurable imprints you leave on the sands of time." "I'm sorry, Mr. Parker, but you'll have to figure it out for yourself." There is no mention of the key in the will. Tim walked out of the lawyer's office, ready to break the lock and discover what the box had been hidden all these years. Tim returned home and attempted to smash the lock with an ancient claw hammer, but in vain. Only for illustration purposes. What the hell is inside this thing? What happened to the key? Tim kicked the chest after all of his efforts to open it failed. He was perplexed and inquisitive about what his late father had left him. He then remembered his boyhood house, where he and his twin sister Karen had grown up. Tim and Karen's mother died in a fire just 2 months after they were born. They were nurtured by their father, Jonathan, their entire lives, and as children, the brothers were the greatest of friends. They were drawn to the mysterious chest sitting on a table beneath the Last Supper painting in the living room as they got older. Tim and Karen were always interested about what was in that box, and as time passed, their speculations only grew stronger. "I'm sure it's some treasure from our grandparents or great-grandparents," Tim informed Karen once. "No, it has to be money, bundles of them, and maybe we'll get them when we turn 18, Karen objected. Tim and Karen spent many late nights as children speculating about what might be in that box. They even asked their father about it one day, but he remained tight-lipped and angrily told them not to approach or touch the box. He was dead set on keeping the box safe, even hanging the key on a hook high above the fireplace so the youngsters couldn't get their hands on its contents. He was extremely cautious about whatever he was keeping from his children and everyone else, only for illustration purposes. Tim and Karen continued on with their lives as the years passed. They married and had children, and their brother-sister relationship deteriorated with time. Jonathan could see the tension between the twins as they struggled over who would inherit their father's mansion. It seemed to go on forever, and he was heartbroken to see his family disintegrate. Jonathan had only wanted his children to get along, but no matter what technique he attempted to bring them together, nothing worked. Because they resided in different places, he would occasionally invite one of them over, without mentioning that the other sibling was already present. Tim and Karen, to his surprise, couldn't even stand facing each other, let alone occupy the same room. That was how much they despised one another, and their animosity had only grown worse over time. Meanwhile, Jonathan's health began to deteriorate as a result of aging, and even on his deathbed, he desired his children would set aside their differences and reconcile. But who knew the unlucky father would go to his grave with nothing but a wounded heart? Tim acquired the strange box that had kept him guessing since childhood after his father died. He needed the key to open the box and claim what was within, so he went to his old home to look for it. Tim quickly drove to his father's house, and as he got closer, he felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. It had been a long time since he had been inside. The yard was overgrown. The fountain, which featured a marble figure of an angel in the center, had crumbled and succumbed to the fury of time. Tim's childhood home no longer appeared to be the caring environment he recalled. As he approached the entrance, a strong blast of wind brushed across him, creating an unsettling calm. The house was locked since the late Jonathan had not left it to anyone. Tim figured the key had to be somewhere in the living room, above the fireplace, so he slipped inside the house by climbing over the roof to his bedroom window. Tim went down the creaky wooden steps, making his way to the fireplace where his father had last hung the key. As he got closer, he felt a cool, musky breeze brush past him. Except for the one in his room, all of the doors and windows were shut. So where was the air coming in from? Tim's pulse hammered as he reached for the key and spun around, a wave of panic washing over him when he noticed a shadow behind him. Tim? What exactly are you doing here? Karen screamed, shining the mobile phone flashlight in Tim's face. She was clearly shocked and was not expecting to see her brother there. She, too, had slipped into the house through a window in the guest room, not far from Tim's position. Karen? What in the world are you doing here? Tim exclaimed. Dad left me his old chest, and I came here to find the key. But what exactly are you doing here? Dad bequeathed me the key. So I came here to find the chest, said Karen, puzzled about why her dad had given Tim the chest without the key, and her the key without the chest. Something has to be wrong, they thought, and stared at each other, stunned. They realized it was their late dad's twisted plan to bring them together and make them talk. But once again, they began to quarrel. Dad should have given me the chest, Karen blurted out. Oh, really? And what do you think I'll do with the darn key alone? Hang around my neck like a fool? Tim argued. The siblings fumed and eventually realized they had to bring both the key and the chest together to see what was in the box. They grumbled and swore, but they had no choice and decided to open the chest together, only for illustration purposes. Source: Pixabay. Tim and Karen's hearts pounded as they lifted the lid. They were about to see something their father had been withholding from them their entire lives for the first time in years, and it was beyond anything they could have ever imagined. What is this? Tim asked, picking up a document buried between what appeared to be an old photo album. The paper turned out to be the second section of their late father's conditional will. When Tim and Karen began reading their father's final words, tears welled up in their eyes, and they realized why he had never allowed them near the chest. They stared into one another's eyes as tears streamed down their cheeks. Tim and Karen understood they had to make a difficult decision that would have an influence on their relationship as well as their feelings for their late mother. What was it about this conditional will that caused siblings who had just fought to cry on each other's shoulders? What were they about to decide? Was Jonathan's soul finally resting in peace? Were his children going to make amends? Tim and Karen discovered the answers while flipping through the album, only for illustration purposes. Unsplash. When they saw their childhood images and those of their father, tears streamed down their cheeks. There were 3 priceless recollections of their late parents' love among those photos. Their wedding shots. As it turned out, those 3 photographs were the only relics of their late mother's life, as all of her things and photographs had been destroyed in the fire. Their late father treasured these memories and never let anyone, not even his children, see them because he was scared they would be ruined. But it was now up to them to decide whether they wanted to save their late mother's treasured memories or trash them in order to divide the house equally. Tim and Karen had inherited Jonathan's house jointly, according to Jonathan's last will and testament. They would be entitled to split the inheritance evenly, however, only if they cut one of the 3 photographs of their late mother and submitted the parts to the lawyer. If they do not desire to do so, they must reconcile and inherit the property jointly. Tim and Karen were caught between their competitiveness and their affection for their mother. They recognized that these photos were the only remaining mementos of their mother's life, and the prospect of chopping one of them was like a dagger slashing through their hearts. Something moved as the siblings glanced helplessly at each other. I can't do it, exclaimed Tim, backing away from the chest and clutching a photograph of his late mother closer to his heart. Me too. I can't do it, Tim, Karen sobbed. We just have these lovely memories of Mom. They are really important to us. They grieved as they remembered the pleasant times they had as a family, wondering how beautiful their parents' love would have been. Tim and Karen then hugged one another as tears flowed down their cheeks. They exhaled softly as they looked at the chest, recognizing that was their late father's plan to bring them closer together. Do you remember this one? You tumbled off the bike that Dad got me. Karen laughed as she flipped through her photo album. And this one? When you won the last prize in the drawing competition and pretended to lift a championship trophy. Tim laughed. The siblings laughed and grieved as they flicked through the album's pages, and the schism that had formed between them flashed before their eyes, only for illustration purposes. What were we fighting about? I mean, how did it even begin? Tim was perplexed. I'm not sure. Wait, you were the one who stated that Dad's house would be yours. Tim, you started it. It was just a joke, Karen. You took it seriously and began to make a great deal about it. You even failed to invite me to your daughter's baptism. I assumed you were too upset with me to come anyway, Tim. I had no idea you wanted to be there. I apologize. I believe we took our fight too seriously without knowing how it began in the first place. Tim and Karen rose from the floor, their hearts heavy, and with some new knowledge, they photographed their late parents' wedding. You ready for this? Tim asked Karen, and she agreed with a big smile and tears in her eyes. The siblings agreed to set aside their disagreements and reconcile, just as their late father had intended. Tim and Karen then walked out of the house, having decided to take ownership of the property together. And before they left, they hung the third photograph of their parents in a photo frame on the nail, where the key to the wooden chest formerly dangled. What can we glean from this narrative? No amount of money can buy the calm and happiness that your family provides. Tim and Karen were feuding about who would receive their father's estate. However, they learned that being in a family was more important than wealth. Memories are the immeasurable imprints you leave on the sands of time. After finding their late parents' wedding photos in the wooden chest, Tim and Karen decided to preserve those memories and not ruin them in their race to split their inheritance equally. To respect their late father's wish, they eventually reconciled and repaired their shattered ties. This piece is inspired by stories from the everyday lives of our readers and written by a professional writer. Any similarity to real names or locales is entirely accidental. All images are for illustration purposes only. Tell us what you think, and please spread the word. It might inspire them and make their day brighter.